The sound of heavy breathing filled the training room. 5 figures circled slowly, their alien forms casting long shadows across the polished floor. At the center stood an elderly human male, his weathered face glistening with sweat, but his stance firm and unwavering. Colonel James Iron Carson's eyes darted between his opponents, tracking each subtle shift in their posture. "I expected more from Earth's so-called champion," hissed the tallest alien, a draconian, with scales that shimmered like oil on water. "They sent us a fragile old man instead of a warrior." The others chuckled, a discordant sound that echoed off the walls. Carson didn't respond. His breathing remained measured, controlled. Decades of combat experience had taught him that words wasted energy. And energy was a resource he couldn't afford to squander, not when outnumbered 5-1. The first attack came from his left, a blur of limbs, as a Vexian lunged forward, its forearms moving in perfect coordination. Carson pivoted slightly, his movement so economical it barely registered to the untrained eye. The Vexian strike missed by millimeters. Before it could recover, Carson's hand shot out, fingers rigid, striking a precise point where the creature's exoskeleton joined at the thorax. The Vexian's limbs seized up instantly. It toppled to the floor with a clatter of chitinous plates. The remaining 4 attackers froze, their confidence visibly shaken. Carson hadn't even shifted his feet. "Impossible," muttered the draconian leader. "Human reflexes aren't." His words cut short as 2 more aliens charged simultaneously. Carson dropped low, his aging body moving with a surprising fluidity. One sweeping leg took the first attacker off balance. As it fell, Carson rose, redirecting the second attacker's momentum with a subtle shift of his shoulders. The 2 aliens collided with bone-jarring force. 3 down. 20 seconds had passed. The 4th attacker, a hulking Krillian with natural armor plates, hesitated just long enough for Carson to close the distance. What followed was a precise series of strikes that found the narrow gaps between armor plates, pressure points that human eyes shouldn't have been able to identify. The Krillian collapsed, its nervous system temporarily paralyzed. Only the draconian leader remained. Fear replaced arrogance in his reptilian eyes. "What are you?" he whispered. Carson straightened up, his breath still controlled despite the exertion. "Just an old man from Earth," he replied, his voice gravelly but calm. "Who did his homework?" As the draconian charged in desperation, Carson's movements became a blur. 3 days earlier, the thud of impact echoed through the community center as Carson guided his student's hand toward the practice dummy. "Remember, Eric, it's not about strength, it's about precision." He adjusted the young veteran's wrist slightly. "The body has weaknesses. Pressure points. Finding them means you don't have to be the strongest person in the fight." Eric nodded, concentration etched on his face. Like many who came to Carson's class, he carried both visible and invisible scars from combat. A prosthetic leg. Eyes that darted toward exits whenever doors opened too loudly. Carson recognized the signs all too well. "Try again," Carson instructed, stepping back to observe. His own reflection caught his attention in the wall mirror, tall but slightly stooped now at 67, gray hair, cropped in a military cut that he'd maintained decades after leaving active service. The years had weathered his face like sun-baked leather, but his eyes remained sharp, observant. Eric's next strike hit the target perfectly. Carson nodded in approval. "Better, much better. Your body remembers what to do. Trust it." As the class wound down, Carson watched his students file out, 12 men and women. Most veterans like himself, some with disabilities, all finding something they needed in the discipline and community of martial arts. It had become his mission in retirement, giving fellow warriors tools to navigate civilian life. He was wiping down equipment when he noticed the figure standing in the doorway. Military bearing was unmistakable, the ramrod straight posture, the evaluating gaze. The visitor wore civilian clothes but couldn't hide his true nature any more than Carson could. "Colonel Carson." The man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Major Robert Williams, United States Army." Carson took the offered hand, noting the firm grip. "Haven't been colonel for a long time, Major." "Just Carson will do." Williams nodded respectfully. "Once a colonel, always a colonel, sir. May I speak with you privately?" "It's a matter of national security." Carson raised an eyebrow, but gestured towards his small office in the back. As they walked, memories flooded, unbidden mission briefings, classified orders, the weight of decisions that sent men and women into harm's way. He'd left that life behind 15 years ago, or thought he had. The office was Spartan: a desk, two chairs, and walls adorned with faded photographs and military citations. A shadow box displayed Carson's medals, including the Distinguished Service Cross and Purple Heart. William's eyes lingered on the display before he sat down. "I'll get straight to the point, Colonel. I've been sent by the Department of Defense. We need your expertise for a unique situation." Carson leaned back in his chair. "I'm retired major, have been for 15 years. There are younger, sharper minds at the Pentagon's disposal." "Not for this." Williams reached into his briefcase and removed a tablet. "What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. It exists under no official program. Technically, it doesn't exist at all." He slid the tablet across the desk. Carson picked it up warily and pressed play on the video file already queued up. The footage was grainy at first, what appeared to be a military testing ground. Then the camera panned to reveal something that made Carson's breath catch. Standing among uniformed personnel was a being that couldn't possibly be human. Tall, with iridescent skin and multiple limbs, it moved with an unsettling grace as it demonstrated what appeared to be combat techniques to the observers. "What am I looking at, Major?" Carson kept his voice level despite his racing thoughts. "First contact, Colonel, though not as recent as most Americans would believe." Williams leaned forward. "We've known about them for almost a decade now. This footage is from 6 years ago." Carson watched transfixed as the scene shifted to show more extraterrestrial beings. Different species judging by their varied physiologies, all demonstrating different combat styles to military observers. "Why show me this?" Carson finally asked, setting down the tablet. "Because tomorrow you're being invited to a meeting that will change the course of human history." Williams' expression was grave, "and potentially determine whether humanity has a future among the stars at all." The black SUV with government plates arrived at Carson's modest home precisely at 0700 the next morning. He was ready, dressed in a simple but formal suit, overnight bag, packed as instructed. Whatever this meeting entailed, Williams had made it clear it wouldn't be brief. As they drove out of Houston, Carson watched the city give way to the sprawling Texas countryside. They had been driving for nearly 2 hours, well away from main highways, when they turned onto an unmarked road that led to what appeared to be an abandoned airfield. "Cold War relic," Williams explained as they approached a cluster of weathered buildings. "Or that's what the public records say. In reality, this has been an active black site since 2018. Security was extensive: multiple checkpoints, biometric scanners, armed guards who observed them with unnerving intensity." Carson noted that several guards wore unusual devices on their belts, technology he didn't recognize from his military days. They were led to an elevator, hidden behind what had appeared to be a solid concrete wall. It descended far deeper than Carson had expected, at least 15 floors by his count, before opening into a state-of-the-art facility that bore no resemblance to the dilapidated structures above. "Welcome to Starfall Base," Williams said as they stepped into a corridor bustling with activity. Military personnel in unmarked uniforms moved purposefully alongside civilians in lab coats. The heart of Earth's extraterrestrial relations program. Carson absorbed everything with a soldier's eye, noting security measures, mapping exits, assessing potential threats out of decades-old habit. But it was the people that caught his attention most. They moved with purpose, yes, but also with an underlying tension that spoke of high stakes and higher pressure. "This way, sir." Williams guided him toward a conference room where several people were already gathered around a large table. At the head sat an elegant woman in her early 60s, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her bearing suggesting authority. "Ambassador Hawkins," Williams announced, "Colonel James Carson has arrived." The woman rose, extending her hand. "Colonel, thank you for coming. I'm Amelia Hawkins, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Alliance." Carson shook her hand, noting her firm grip and direct gaze. "Didn't know Earth had extraterrestrial ambassadors." "Few do." Hawkins gestured for him to sit. "What you learned today doesn't leave this facility. The public isn't ready for full disclosure." As Carson took his seat, he studied the others present: 2 military generals he recognized from the news, several scientists judging by their attire, and at least 3 individuals whose roles weren't immediately apparent, but who carried themselves with the watchful readiness of security personnel. "I'll be direct, Colonel," Hawkins began once everyone was settled. 8 years ago, Earth was approached by representatives of what calls itself the Galactic Alliance, a coalition of spacefaring civilizations spanning our galactic arm. After initial contact, we've been in what might be called a probationary period, assessing compatibility for potential membership. A holographic display activated in the center of the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the Milky Way with various regions highlighted in different colors. The Alliance comprises 27 distinct civilizations across over 300 inhabited worlds. Hawkins continued, their technological advancement exceeds ours by centuries in most areas. They've had faster-than-light travel for over a millennium. Their medical science can cure most diseases we consider terminal. Their energy production makes our nuclear capabilities look like campfires. Carson studied the map, noting Earth's position, a tiny, barely visible point at the edge of one spiral arm. And they want us to join them. One of the scientists, a bespectacled man with a nervous demeanor, spoke up. Resources partially. Earth has certain rare elements they value, but mainly biodiversity. The Alliance places tremendous value on unique biological and cultural developments. Hawkins nodded. However, our admission isn't proceeding smoothly. There's significant resistance from several member species who view humans as primitive, potentially dangerous. Our history of internal warfare concerns them. They're not wrong, Carson said bluntly. We've been killing each other since we figured out rocks make good weapons. True, Hawkins conceded, but there's more to it. The Alliance categorizes worlds based on habitability and environmental challenges. Their scale runs from Category 1 paradise worlds with minimal natural threats to Category 7, what they term death worlds, with extreme gravity, aggressive fauna, volatile weather, and other hazards. Another scientist, a woman with close-cropped hair, picked up the thread. Based on initial surveys, the Alliance classified Earth as Category 3, moderately challenging but generally benign. This classification directly impacts how they view a species' potential and capabilities. Carson leaned forward, sensing they were approaching the real reason for his presence. Let me guess they got it wrong. A grim smile touched Hawkins' lips. Dramatically wrong. Earth is by their own metrics a solid Category 7. The Alliance representatives who conducted the initial survey simply couldn't believe a primitive species could evolve and thrive in such conditions. The implications are significant, the female scientist continued. Species from Category 7 worlds are considered among the most formidable warriors in the galaxy due to evolutionary pressures. They develop enhanced strength, reflexes, and problem-solving abilities simply to survive their environments. Williams slid a folder across the table to Carson. This contains comparative physiological data. Human bone density is nearly twice that of most Alliance species. Our muscle fiber efficiency is off their charts. Even our reaction times, when accounting for our higher gravity, exceed their norms by significant margins. Carson flipped through the documents, scanning the technical data and comparative anatomical diagrams. They think we're weak because we don't have claws or armor plating. Precisely, Hawkins confirmed, and this misconception has led to our relegation to what amounts to second-class status in Alliance considerations. We're viewed as a species best suited for agricultural work or basic manufacturing, not leadership, not security, certainly not combat roles. One of the generals, a stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair, spoke for the first time. The strategic implications cannot be overstated, Colonel. If Earth joins the Alliance as a minor partner with limited influence, our entire civilization becomes vulnerable. We need to correct this misperception before formal admission protocols are finalized. Carson closed the folder. And I fit into this how exactly Hawkins' expression became more intense. The Alliance maintains what they call the Galactic Combat Academy, an elite training facility where the various species send their best warriors to train and exchange combat techniques. It's as much a political institution as a military one. Status within the Academy directly influences a species' standing in Alliance security matters. We've been permitted to send a representative, Williams added, someone to demonstrate human combat capabilities and potentially teach human martial arts techniques. Carson let out a short laugh. And you want that representative to be a retired colonel pushing 70. There are younger, stronger candidates, special forces operators in their prime, Olympic athletes. None with your specific qualifications, Hawkins countered. The Academy values age and experience. Many of their master instructors are the equivalent of centuries old by human standards. A young human would be dismissed as an anomaly, impressive perhaps, but not representative. You have formal training in 5 distinct martial arts disciplines, Williams continued. You've studied combat techniques from cultures around the world. You have actual battlefield experience from multiple conflicts. And most importantly, you have decades of experience teaching others. Carson leaned back in his chair, considering. You're not telling me everything. Hawkins exchanged glances with the others before nodding slowly. The truth, Colonel, is that we're running out of time. There's a faction within the Alliance pushing to reclassify Earth entirely not as a potential member world, but as a protected developing planet. This would essentially place us under their guardianship, limiting our technological development and restricting our access to space. They'd quarantine us, the bespectacled scientist clarified. For our own good, of course. In 6 weeks, Hawkins continued, the Alliance Council meets to vote on our status. Before then, we need to demonstrate that humans are not only capable but valuable potential allies. The Combat Academy is our best venue for that demonstration. Carson's mind raced through the implications. The fate of human civilization potentially rested on changing alien perceptions. It seemed absurd, like the plot of a science fiction novel rather than reality. And yet the evidence sat before him, the advanced technology, the detailed physiological comparisons, the urgency in the eyes of everyone present. If I agree, he said slowly, what exactly would be expected of me? You would travel to the Academy, which orbits a neutral star system approximately 30 light-years from Earth, Hawkins explained. Alliance transportation technology makes this a journey of hours rather than years. You would represent humanity as an instructor of Earth combat techniques. You would engage with other species, participate in demonstrations, and most critically, help shift the narrative about human capabilities. And if I refuse, the room fell silent for a long moment. Then we find another candidate, Williams finally said, but none with your particular combination of skills and experience. None who served with your distinction. None who understand combat as both science and art the way you do. Carson stood up abruptly, moving to the large window that overlooked the underground facility. Below, he could see more labs, training areas, and what appeared to be alien technology under study. The scope of what had been happening without public knowledge was staggering. I've been retired for 15 years, he said without turning around. I teach self-defense to veterans dealing with trauma. I grow tomatoes on my patio. I'm not the man I was. With respect, sir, Williams replied, that's precisely why it needs to be you. The Alliance doesn't need to see what humanity's specialized warriors can do. They need to see what an ordinary human, a retired one no less, is capable of in their environment. Carson turned back to face them. How long? 3 months minimum, Hawkins answered, possibly up to 6 depending on progress and the political situation. The weight of the decision pressed down on Carson. At his age, he'd believed his service to country and planet was behind him. He'd made peace with that. Now fate or circumstance was calling him back for one final mission, perhaps the most important one of his life. I need to think, he said finally. Hawkins nodded. Of course, we've prepared quarters for you here on base. Take the night to consider, but we'll need your answer by morning. The Alliance transport arrives in 36 hours. As Carson was escorted to his temporary quarters, his mind filled with contradictory thoughts. The soldier in him recognized duty when it called. The teacher in him saw an unprecedented opportunity to share knowledge. But the aging man who woke up with aching joints and fading energy questioned whether he was truly the right choice for such a critical mission. His room was comfortable but Spartan, much like military quarters anywhere, though the technology was notably advanced. A tablet on the bedside table contained more detailed information about the Alliance, the Academy, and the various species he would encounter if he accepted. Carson spent hours reading absorbing information about alien physiologies, cultural norms, and combat traditions. The more he learned, the more he understood why Earth's initial classification had been so drastically wrong. By Alliance standards, humans had evolved on a nightmare world of high gravity, extreme weather, and predators that would terrify most alien species. A soft knock at his door interrupted his studies. When he opened it, he found Ambassador Hawkins standing there now, dressed more casually than during their meeting. May I come in, Colonel? She asked. Carson stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Ambassador? Amelia, please. She took a seat in the room's single chair, while Carson sat on the edge of the bed. I thought you might have questions that weren't appropriate to ask in the full briefing. Carson studied her for a moment. Why me the real reason? A faint smile touched her lips. Perceptive. As expected. She sighed lightly. The full truth is that you were not our first choice colonel. We initially sent a younger candidate, Major David Chen, Special Forces Olympic-level martial artist. 34 years old and in peak condition. What happened to him? Nothing tragic, she assured him, but his reception was problematic. The Alliance species saw him as an anomaly, a specialized warrior rather than a representative example. They dismissed his capabilities as being the result of intensive genetic selection and training programs not indicative of baseline human potential. Carson nodded slowly. So you need someone they can't dismiss as a super soldier. Exactly. Someone with experience and wisdom that transcends physical prowess. Someone who can demonstrate that human combat effectiveness isn't just about strength or speed, but about strategy, adaptability, and centuries of evolved technique. She leaned forward, her expression intensifying. There's something else you should know. The Alliance species have a deep respect for age. Many of them live for centuries. Their cultures value the accumulated wisdom of elders. Your age, which might be seen as a limitation in human military context, actually grants you authority in their eyes. Carson absorbed this information, reconciling it with what he'd already learned. There's significant risk in this mission. It wasn't a question, but Hawkins nodded anyway. Yes. While open violence is rare in Alliance space, the political tensions surrounding Earth's admission are real. You would be walking into an environment where many would prefer to see you, and by extension, humanity fail. And if I do fail, Hawkins' expression grew somber. Then Earth's position becomes precarious. Best case scenario, we're admitted as a minor member with limited rights and protection. Worst case, we're placed under protection that amounts to containment. Carson stood and moved to the small window that looked out onto the underground facility. Scientists and military personnel continued their work below, oblivious to the conversation that might determine humanity's cosmic fate. I've been in combat, he said quietly. Real combat, not tournaments or demonstrations. I've killed men. I've watched friends die. I've made decisions that haunt me still. He turned back to face her. The Alliance needs to understand that human combat isn't a sport. It evolved from necessity, from survival. Our martial arts weren't developed for competitions. They were created to end threats efficiently. That's precisely why you're the right choice, Hawkins replied. You understand the gravity of what we're asking. You know the difference between demonstration and actual conflict. You can show them our capabilities without unnecessarily alarming them. Carson was silent for a long moment, weighing his options, his responsibilities, his limitations. Finally, he asked, when do we leave? Relief flooded Hawkins's features. The transport arrives tomorrow evening. We'll have 24 hours for final preparations and briefings. She stood and extended her hand. Thank you, Colonel. I won't pretend to understand the sacrifice you're making at your age, but please know that your service to humanity may be more significant than any military campaign in history. As they shook hands, Carson felt the familiar weight of duty settling onto his shoulders, a weight he'd thought he'd put down for good. I'm not doing this for glory or recognition, Ambassador. I'm doing it because it seems I'm the right tool for the job, nothing more. After Hawkins departed, Carson returned to the tablet, studying the alien species he would soon encounter. The Draconians, reptilian and honor-bound. The Vexians, insectoid with multiple limbs and lightning reflexes. The Krillians, massive and naturally armored. Each with their own combat traditions, their own strengths and weaknesses. As midnight approached, he set the tablet aside and began a series of stretching exercises, the same routine he'd maintained for decades. His body protested with the familiar aches of age, but the movements came naturally, muscle memory overriding discomfort. Tomorrow he would accept a mission that would take him farther from home than any human had traveled before 2018. He would face challenges he could scarcely imagine, but tonight he would prepare as he always had, with discipline, focus, and the quiet certainty that came from decades of service. The fate of humanity might rest on his aging shoulders, but James Iron Carson had carried heavy burdens before. One more mission, One last service. He would not fail. The Alliance transport vessel defied human expectations of spacecraft. Rather than the sleek metallic designs of science fiction, it resembled something organic, a pearlescent oval with no visible seams or propulsion systems hovering silently above the desert landing pad at Starfall Base. Carson stood beside Ambassador Hawkins, a small duffel bag containing his few personal items at his feet. He'd spent the past 24 hours in intensive briefings, learning Alliance protocols, reviewing details about the Combat Academy, and studying the basics of the standard translating devices he would use. "Remember," Hawkins said quietly as they watched the vessel descend, "you're not just a combat instructor, you're a diplomat. Every interaction will shape their perception of humanity." Carson nodded. "I understand the mission, Ambassador." A section of the vessel's hull suddenly rippled and parted, revealing an entrance where none had been visible before. A ramp extended downward and two figures emerged, one clearly human, the other decidedly not. The human was a man in his early 50s, dressed in what appeared to be a formal uniform of unfamiliar design. The alien beside him stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent blue-green skin and 4 arms, each ending in 3-fingered hands. Its head was vaguely humanoid, but with large multifaceted eyes and no visible nose or ears. "Ambassador Hawkins," the human called as they approached. "Right on schedule as promised." "Captain Reynolds," Hawkins replied with a nod. "Always a pleasure to see Earth's first starship, Captain, even if your vessel is borrowed." Reynolds smiled wryly before turning to Carson. "Colonel Carson John Reynolds. I'll be your liaison during transit to the Academy." He gestured to his alien companion. "This is Secondary Facilitator Zixtel of the Vexian Confederation, the Alliance's representative for this transfer." The alien made a complex gesture with its upper arms, while its lower arms remained still, a formal greeting, Carson recalled from his briefings. "Honored to meet Earth's combat representative." The alien said its words translated through a small device at what might be considered its throat. The voice that emerged was neither male nor female, but carried clear inflections of respect. "Your journey honors us." Carson returned the gesture as he had been taught, careful to mirror the exact movement. "The honor is mine, Secondary Facilitator. I look forward to learning from the Alliance's combat traditions even as I share Earth's." The alien's multifaceted eyes seemed to shimmer an expression of approval according to his briefings. Well spoken for a species so new to galactic society. Perhaps the reports of human adaptability are not exaggerated. Captain Reynolds gestured toward the vessel. "We should board. The transit window is optimal within the next 30 minutes. Carson turned to Hawkins, extending his hand. "Ambassador." She took it firmly. "Good luck, Colonel. Remember everything we've discussed. The future of Earth may depend on it." As Carson followed Reynolds and the Vexian up the ramp, he felt the weight of that responsibility settling more firmly on his shoulders. Behind him lay everything familiar, his home, his planet, the comfortable retirement he'd built. Ahead lay a journey beyond human experience until just a few years ago. The interior of the vessel was as unusual as its exterior, organic curves rather than angular construction lighting that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves rather than distinct fixtures. The air carried a faint scent Carson couldn't identify, not unpleasant, but definitely alien. "This way to your quarters," Reynolds directed, leading him down a corridor that curved gently. "The journey will take approximately 8 hours by Alliance FTL methods. I suggest you rest. The transition can be disorienting for humans experiencing it the first time." The room assigned to Carson was small but comfortable, with furnishings that seemed designed with human physiology in mind. A window, or what appeared to be one, showed the desert landscape outside, though Carson suspected it might be a visual feed rather than actual transparency. "I'll return when we're approaching Academy space," Reynolds said. "The translating device on the table is calibrated for all major Alliance languages. I suggest wearing it at all times, even during sleep, to acclimate." After Reynolds departed, Carson sat on the edge of what served as a bed, examining the translator, a small, curved device designed to fit behind the ear. According to his briefings, it would not only translate spoken language, but also help interpret nonverbal communication from species with radically different expressions and body language. As he attached the device, a subtle vibration indicated it had activated. Almost immediately, the ambient sounds of the ship seemed to shift slightly, still audible, but somehow more comprehensible, as if his brain was being gently rewired to understand patterns previously meaningless. A soft tone filled the room, followed by a voice speaking in perfect English. Attention honored passengers. Departure sequence initiating. Please secure yourselves for a transition to superluminal velocity. Carson lay back on the bed following instructions to place his hands at his sides and relax. The lighting dimmed gradually and a faint humming grew in intensity. There was no sensation of acceleration, no pressure pushing him into the mattress as he had expected from his experience with aircraft. Instead, the humming peaked, and then, a moment of absolute disorientation. Carson's mind struggled to process sensations for which evolution had not prepared the human brain. Colors that shouldn't exist, dimensions that folded in impossible ways, a sound that wasn't a sound but rather the concept of sound itself. Then normalcy returned. The lighting rose to its previous level. The humming faded. Only a slight tingling in his extremities suggested anything had happened at all. Transition complete, announced the same voice. We are now traveling at approximately 750 times light speed by Earth measurements. Estimated arrival at Galactic Combat Academy, 7 hours 43 minutes. Carson took a deep breath, fighting down a wave of nausea that accompanied the return to normal perception. His briefing had warned of this effect, the human mind struggling to reconcile experiences outside its evolutionary framework. He focused on his breathing, using meditation techniques he'd learned decades ago to center himself. When the discomfort passed, he rose and moved to the window. Instead of the Texas desert, it now showed a view that no human had witnessed until the last few years, the streaming blur of stars as seen during faster-than-light travel. The effect was hypnotic, almost like watching flowing water, but with points of light instead of liquid. Carson found himself contemplating the scale of what he was experiencing. In his lifetime, humanity had gone from the first hesitant steps into space to traveling between stars. The technological leap was unprecedented, though he reminded himself not achieved through human ingenuity alone, but through contact with a galactic civilization thousands of years more advanced, a civilization that now might determine humanity's future place in the cosmos, a future that somehow had come to rest partially on his aging shoulders. He turned away from the window and began a series of stretching exercises, limbering muscles that would soon be tested in ways he could only begin to imagine. Whatever awaited him at the academy, he would face it as he had faced every challenge in his long career, prepared, disciplined, and resolute. As the vessel carried him toward his destination at speeds that defied human comprehension, Colonel James Iron Carson prepared for the most important mission of his life, not on a battlefield, but in a classroom among the stars. The academy materialized before them like a dream taking physical form. Through the viewport, Carson watched as the massive structure grew from a distant speck to an awe-inspiring reality. Unlike the organic curves of the Alliance transport, the Academy was a triumph of geometric precision, a series of interconnected rings and spires that rotated slowly around a central hub, all suspended in the void against the backdrop of an unfamiliar star system. Impressive, isn't it? Captain Reynolds stood beside him, arms crossed, as always they approached. The main structure is over 3,000 years old. They keep adding to it as new species join the Alliance. Carson nodded silently, his soldier's mind already calculating scale and assessing potential threats. The Academy dwarfed anything humans had built in space. It made the International Space Station look like a child's toy by comparison. Population approximately 20,000, Reynolds continued. Instructors, students, support staff, and diplomatic personnel from across Alliance space. The Earth section is, well, modest would be generous. We've been allocated quarters for up to 20 personnel, though currently we only maintain a staff of 5. 5 humans among 20,000 aliens, Carson mused. Those aren't favorable odds. Reynolds smiled thinly. You were a colonel, sir. When are the odds ever favorable? A gentle vibration passed through the ship as docking procedures began. Carson felt the familiar pre-mission tension, that quiet alertness that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. Despite the diplomatic nature of his assignment, his instincts warned him to remain vigilant. A word of advice before we dock, Reynolds said, lowering his voice. The Academy operates on a clear hierarchy. Master instructors at the top, then senior instructors, junior instructors, advanced students, and basic trainees. As Earth's representative, you'll likely be classified initially as a junior instructor, at best possibly even as an advanced student despite your age. It's political. I understand I'll be starting at the bottom of the food chain. Not quite the bottom, Reynolds corrected, but you'll need to earn respect, especially from Master Krelig. The head of the academy, Reynolds nodded grimly, a Krillian, been running the academy for over 70 years. Traditional to a fault and not exactly enthusiastic about Earth's inclusion in alliance affairs. Tread carefully around him. A final shudder passed through the vessel as it completed docking procedures. Carson took a deep breath, centering himself as he had before countless missions. The familiar ritual calmed his mind and steadied his pulse. "Remember your briefing," Reynolds said as they moved toward the airlock. "The gravity in the human section is calibrated to Earth normal. The common areas in other species sections will feel lighter, approximately 70% of what you're used to. It gives you an advantage in physical performance, but don't flaunt it." The airlock cycled open to reveal a small reception area where three figures waited, two clearly human, the third unmistakably alien. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall with gray-green skin covered in natural armor plates that resembled overlapping stones. Its 4 eyes tracked their movement, three, a milky white one still clear and piercing. "Captain Reynolds," the creature rumbled, its words translated seamlessly through Carson's earpiece. "Punctual as always, a trait your species seems to share with the Cronians." The observation didn't sound particularly complimentary. "Master Krelig," Reynolds replied with a formal bow. "May I present Colonel James Carson, Earth's new combat instructor." Carson stepped forward, duplicating Reynolds' bow precisely. "Master Krelig, it's an honor to study at an institution with such history." The Krillian's good eye narrowed slightly as it studied Carson. "Colonel, your file indicates extensive combat experience by human standards. Impressive, perhaps, for a species so new to civilized space. We shall see if your techniques merit inclusion in our curriculum." The dismissive tone was unmistakable. Carson kept his expression neutral, recognizing the challenge beneath the words. This was the first test not of his combat skills, but of his temperament. "I look forward to the opportunity to both teach and learn, Master Krelig. Every warrior culture has wisdom to offer." A slight shift in the Krillian's posture suggested surprise, perhaps at Carson's diplomacy, perhaps at his restraint. Without further acknowledgement, Krelig turned and departed, heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. One of the humans, a woman in her 40s with short-cropped hair and the bearing of a military officer, stepped forward. "Welcome aboard, Colonel. Commander Sarah Reeves, Earth Liaison Office. This is Dr. Alan Chen, our xenobiology specialist." She gestured to the Asian man beside her, who nodded in greeting. "We weren't expecting you for another week," Dr. Chen admitted as they led Carson from the docking area. "The usual bureaucratic delays. You must have friends in high places to cut through Alliance red tape so efficiently." "Or Earth's situation is more urgent than advertised," Carson replied quietly. A shadow passed over Commander Reeves' face. "We'll brief you fully once we reach our section. The corridors have ears, sometimes literally depending on the species." They navigated through a series of hallways, passing aliens of various physiologies. Some appeared almost human, save for unusual coloration or subtle anatomical differences. Others were so foreign that Carson struggled to comprehend their basic structure. Each time they encountered another being, Reeves and Chen offered the appropriate greeting gesture, which Carson carefully mirrored. The Earth section proved to be a modest suite of rooms located in what felt like a distant corner of the academy. A small common area connected to 5 private quarters, a tiny gymnasium, and what appeared to be a meeting room. The furnishings were clearly designed for human comfort, but the overall impression was of an afterthought, minimal accommodations provided out of obligation rather than welcome. "Home sweet home," Reeves said with a hint of irony as the door sealed behind them. "Not much, but it's the only place on the station where you can be certain conversations remain private." "You mentioned a full briefing," Carson prompted, setting down his duffel bag. Chen activated a control panel and a holographic display appeared in the center of the common area. "Your arrival timing isn't coincidental, Colonel. 3 days ago, we received intelligence that the Draconian delegation has formally petitioned the Alliance Council to reclassify Earth from potential member to protected developmental world." The display showed what appeared to be an official document in an alien script alongside a translation in English. If this petition succeeds, Reeves continued, Earth would effectively become a quarantine planet, no independent spaceflight beyond our solar system, no access to Alliance technology, no voice in galactic affairs that affect us. All for our own protection, naturally, Chen added with evident bitterness, to prevent us from developing along destructive pathways. Carson studied the document, noting the diplomatic language that masked the condescension beneath. And my role in preventing this is, the Combat Academy isn't just a training facility, Reeves explained. It's where Alliance species demonstrate their value as potential military and security partners. A species standing here directly influences their political position within the Alliance. You're here to show them we're not just primitive monkeys with rockets, Chen said bluntly, that human combat traditions have value, that we can contribute meaningfully to Alliance security. Carson moved to the viewport that looked out onto the vast structure of the Academy. How much time do we have? The council vote is scheduled in 6 weeks, Reeves replied. You have until then to make an impression significant enough to sway opinions. No pressure, Chen added with a strained smile. Carson turned back to face them. I'll need comprehensive data on all major species physiologies, combat traditions, and known weaknesses. Already compiled, Chen confirmed, producing a tablet. I've been studying them since we arrived. Everything from Altarian pressure points to Zygonian grappling vulnerabilities. And I'll need a training schedule. Who I'll be working with, when, and under what protocols. Reeves grimaced slightly. That's where things get complicated. Master Krelig has assigned you observer status for your first week. You'll be permitted to watch training sessions, but not participate or instruct. Another test, Carson noted, to see if I accept my place in the hierarchy. Exactly. It's a common tactic with new species representatives. They want to see if you'll protest or accept the limitation gracefully. Carson nodded thoughtfully. I can work with that. Observation has its advantages. What else should I know before I begin? Reeves and Chen exchanged glances. The Draconians will be your most vocal opponents, Chen finally said. They've led the push against Earth's full membership from the beginning. Their lead instructor, Karax, has significant influence with Master Krelig. And they've already spread rumors about human combat effectiveness or lack thereof, Reeves added. Our previous representative struggled with the political aspects of the role. Meaning he demonstrated impressive physical capabilities but lacked diplomatic finesse, she clarified. Every time he was insulted or challenged, he responded with increasing aggression. It played directly into the narrative that humans are dangerous and unpredictable. Carson absorbed this information, mentally adjusting his approach. This mission would require more restraint than aggression, a different kind of battlefield with its own rules of engagement. When do I begin? Tomorrow morning, Reeves said. Academy cycle begins at what would be 0600 Earth time. I'll escort you to the main training hall. For now, I suggest you rest and review the materials Dr. Chen has provided. The transition affects everyone differently. After they departed, leaving him alone in his assigned quarters, Carson began methodically unpacking his few belongings. The room was utilitarian but comfortable by military standards. A bed desk, small bathroom facility, and storage space. The gravity felt familiar, calibrated to Earth normal as promised. He activated the tablet Chen had provided and began studying the detailed files on Alliance species. Their physiologies were fascinating evolutionary adaptations to worlds vastly different from Earth. The Draconians evolved on a low-gravity world with high oxygen content, giving them impressive speed but relatively fragile bone structure. The Krillians developed their natural armor on a radiation-bathed moon where surface exposure was deadly. The Vexians' multiple limbs and compound eyes allowed them to process visual information at speeds that would overwhelm a human brain. Each species had developed combat traditions that played to their natural strengths. Draconian techniques emphasized rapid strikes from multiple angles. Krillian methods relied on their armor and raw strength. Vexian styles utilized their superior coordination and multiple limbs. But they all had weaknesses. Vulnerabilities a human eye might not immediately recognize, but which Carson, with his decades of combat experience, could identify and exploit if necessary. Carson spent hours absorbing the information, memorizing key details, and planning potential approaches. When fatigue finally overtook him, he performed his nightly stretching routine and settled onto the bed, letting his mind process everything he had learned. Tomorrow, the real mission would begin. The main training hall of the Galactic Combat Academy stretched before Carson like a football stadium, its vast space divided into dozens of practice areas where beings from across the Alliance engaged in various forms of combat training. The air hummed with activity, the sounds of impacts, the hiss of what might be energy weapons at low-power voices speaking in languages Carson's translator rendered into comprehensible English. Commander Reeves walked beside him, providing context in a low voice. Each major species maintains its own training area. The central arena is reserved for formal demonstrations and ranking matches. Master instructors often observe from that elevated platform. Carson noted the layout with a soldier's eye, identifying exits, potential hazards, defensible positions, habits, ingrained through decades of military service. He also noted the reactions to his presence. Some aliens showed obvious curiosity, others clear disdain. Many simply ignored him entirely, too focused on their training to acknowledge another new face. The human area is there. Reeves indicated a small section near the far wall, noticeably smaller than those allocated to other species. Not exactly prime real estate, but it's what we've been assigned. Before they could proceed further, a tall figure stepped into their path, a draconian male with scales that shimmered with an iridescent quality that suggested high rank or status. 4 other draconians flanked him, their postures conveying clear hostility. Commander Reeves, the lead draconian, said, his translated voice carrying a hissing undertone. I see Earth has sent yet another representative to demonstrate human inadequacy. Reeves maintained a neutral expression. Senior Instructor Carax, may I present Colonel James Carson. Colonel, this is Senior Instructor Carax of the Draconian Elite Guard. Carson offered the formal draconian greeting he had studied, a specific inclination of the head, combined with a precise hand gesture. Senior Instructor, I look forward to observing your combat traditions. Carax's vertical pupils narrowed slightly, perhaps surprised by Carson's knowledge of proper protocol. Observation is indeed all you will be permitted, human. Master Krelig has made your status quite clear. You will watch and learn from your betters. The dismissive tone carried an unmistakable challenge. Carson recognized the tactic, provoking an emotional response to demonstrate human volatility. He maintained his composed expression. Every warrior begins as a student, regardless of age or prior experience, Carson replied calmly. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from traditions that predate human civilization. Something flickered in Carax's reptilian features. Disappointment, perhaps, at failing to provoke the desired reaction. He switched tactics. I've reviewed your species' combat records, primitive striking techniques, rudimentary grappling. Nothing that would challenge even a draconian adolescent. He stepped closer, using his superior height to loom over Carson. Your bones would shatter like glass against a proper warrior's strength. Several nearby aliens had paused their activities to watch the confrontation, obviously anticipating an escalation. Carson could feel Reeves tensing beside him, likely expecting him to defend human capabilities. Instead, Carson smiled slightly. You may be right, Senior Instructor. Only time and proper demonstration will tell. I wouldn't presume to make claims without evidence. The response clearly caught Carax off guard. The Draconian had expected either submission or aggression, not composed humility. Before he could formulate a new approach, another voice interrupted the deep rumble of Master Krelig. Senior Instructor Carax, I believe your advanced class awaits your instruction. The Krillian Master stood several meters away, his one good eye fixed on the confrontation. Carax immediately stepped back and offered a formal bow. Of course, Master Krelig, I was merely welcoming Earth's new representative. Your hospitality is noted, Krelig replied dryly. Now attend to your duties. As Carax and his followers departed, Krelig approached Carson and Reeves. His massive form moved with surprising grace despite his advanced age and armored physiology. Colonel Carson, I see you've met our draconian contingent. They are passionate about maintaining the Academy's standards. Carson bowed respectfully. Master Krelig, thank you for the opportunity to observe today's training sessions. I hope to learn much from the various traditions represented here. Krelig studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable to human eyes. Commander Reeves will show you to the observation area. Remember your status, Colonel. You are here to watch and learn, not to participate or instruct. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Master. I understand my place. As Krelig moved away to supervise other activities, Reeves led Carson to a raised platform that offered a view of multiple training areas. Well handled, she murmured. Carax was trying to provoke you into either showing aggression or admitting weakness. You gave him neither. Basic psychological warfare, Carson replied quietly, hasn't changed much across the species barrier, it seems. For the next several hours, Carson observed the various training methods with intense concentration. He watched draconian speed-striking drills that blurred the eye. He studied Krillian power techniques that shattered practice dummies. He analyzed Vexian multi-limb combat patterns that seemed impossible for a two-armed species to counter. But he also noted weaknesses. The Draconians relied so heavily on speed that they rarely defended against counterattacks. The Krillians' armor made them overconfident about their vulnerability. The Vexians had blind spots in their otherwise superior visual field. Everything had a weakness. Every technique had a counter. It was the first principle of combat that Carson had learned as a young soldier, and it held true even here among the stars. As the Academy's day cycle progressed, Carson became aware of growing attention directed his way. Word of the new human representative had spread, and various instructors and students found reasons to pass near his observation post, studying him with varying degrees of subtlety. Near midday, an elderly Vexian approached, moving with the slightly stiff gait of advanced age. Unlike the younger members of its species, this one's exoskeleton had faded to a dull gray, and two of its four arms showed signs of injury or wear. You observe with a warrior's eye, human, the Vexian said without preamble. I am Zillock's combat veteran of the Third Nexus conflict, now instructor of Vexian historical combat forms. Carson offered the appropriate greeting for a Vexian elder. Colonel James Carson, United States Army, retired. It's an honor to meet a veteran of your experience, Instructor Zillox. The Vexian's compound eyes seemed to shimmer slightly. Retired, yes, as am I. We share the warrior's final battlefield age itself. Its mandibles clicked in what Carson's translator interpreted as a sound of amusement. Tell me, Colonel Carson, what do you make of our Academy's methods? Carson considered his response carefully. This was likely another test, but perhaps one of genuine interest rather than hostility. Impressive diversity of approaches based on evolutionary adaptations. Each species has developed techniques that maximize their natural advantages. A diplomatic answer, Zillox observed, but not your complete assessment, I think. It would be presumptuous to offer criticism after only a few hours of observation. Zillox's mandibles clicked again. Presumptuous, perhaps, but potentially valuable. Fresh eyes often see what familiar ones miss. Carson glanced around to ensure they weren't being obviously monitored. If I were to offer an initial impression, I would note that most training appears to happen within species. There seems to be limited cross-species instruction. Astute observation. The Academy preaches unity while practicing separation. Politics overwhelms practicality. Zillox shifted slightly closer. We veterans recognize each other, Colonel, across the boundaries of species. You have the eyes of one who has seen real combat, not merely training scenarios. As do you, Instructor. Indeed, and that makes us dangerous to certain elements here. Those who prefer theory to practical experience. Those who maintain the status quo rather than embracing innovation. The Vexian's voice lowered further. Watch yourself carefully, human. Not everyone welcomes Earth's potential contribution to align its security. Before Carson could respond, the Academy's communication system activated, announcing the midday meal period. Zillox stepped back, resuming a more formal posture. Perhaps we will speak again, Colonel Carson. Until then, observe carefully. Knowledge precedes victory. As the elderly Vexian departed, Reeves approached from where she had been monitoring nearby activities. Making friends already? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Lies, perhaps, Carson replied thoughtfully, which might be more valuable than friends in this environment. Reeves nodded toward a different section of the training hall. If you're looking for potential allies, you might want to observe the Altarian training group this afternoon. They've been more open to human contact than most species. During the meal period, which consisted of specially prepared Earth-compatible food in the Academy's vast dining facility, Carson found himself the subject of intense scrutiny from the Academy's population. He maintained a dignified bearing, acknowledging curious looks with polite nods, but avoiding any interactions that might violate his observer status. After the meal, he returned to the training hall to continue his observations. As Reeves had suggested, he positioned himself near the Altarian section, where beings with vaguely humanoid features but shimmering, almost translucent skin practiced what appeared to be a form of defensive combat that utilized an opponent's momentum. One Altarian in particular, smaller than the others with a silvery blue skin tone, demonstrated remarkable skill, despite appearing younger. Carson watched as the young Altarian repeatedly redirected attacks from larger opponents. With minimal effort, their movements fluid and precise. As he observed, Carson became aware of being watched in return. The young Altarian occasionally glanced in his direction between practice sessions, clear curiosity in their luminescent eyes. By the end of the day cycle, Carson had compiled extensive mental notes on 6 different species combat approaches, identified potential allies and opponents, and begun formulating strategies for when he would eventually be permitted to demonstrate human techniques. As he and Reeves prepared to return to the Earth section, Master Krelig appeared once more accompanied by several senior instructors from different species. "Colonel Carson," the Krillian master rumbled, "you have observed our training methods for a full cycle. I trust the experience was educational." Carson bowed respectfully. "Extremely educational, Master Krelig. The diversity and sophistication of Alliance combat traditions are impressive. Tomorrow your observation will continue," Krelig stated. "However, I have decided that a practical demonstration of your species' capabilities would be informative for our instructors." Carson maintained his neutral expression, though inwardly he recognized the opportunity being presented. "I would be honored to demonstrate, Master Krelig. 3 of our junior instructors will engage you in controlled assessment exercises," Krelig continued. "Mind excessive, simply an evaluation of human combat potential. Do you find these terms acceptable?" The phrasing made it clear this was not truly a request. Carson inclined his head slightly. "I accept the opportunity to represent Earth's traditions, Master Krelig. When and where shall this demonstration take place?" "Main arena, mid-cycle tomorrow." Krelig's good eye narrowed slightly. "I recommend adequate rest, Colonel. Your opponents will be selected for their educational value." As Krelig and his entourage departed, Reeves exhaled slowly. "Well, that didn't take long. I expected them to keep you observing for at least 3 days before testing you directly. You think this is an acceleration of their timeline?" "Definitely. Someone's pushing for a quick assessment, probably the Draconians. They want to confirm their narrative about human limitations before you have time to build any alliances or study their techniques thoroughly." Carson nodded thoughtfully. "Then we should prepare accordingly. Who are the most likely candidates for tomorrow's demonstration?" As they walked back to the Earth section, Reeves outlined the possibilities. A Draconian speed specialist, a Krillian power fighter, perhaps a Vexian multi-limb combat expert. Each would present unique challenges designed to highlight human physical limitations. "They're expecting me to rely on strength or speed," Carson mused. "Areas where humans are at a disadvantage against specialized species." "Exactly. What will you do instead?" A slight smile touched Carson's lips. "What I've done for 40 years of combat training, Commander. Adapt." The main arena filled to capacity the following day, aliens of all descriptions crowding the seating areas that surrounded the central combat platform. Word had spread quickly about the human demonstration, drawing spectators from across the Academy. Carson stood at the edge of the arena, performing subtle stretching exercises while maintaining a calm exterior. Beside him, Dr. Chen provided last-minute physiological reminders. "Remember, the Draconian thoracic junction is their weakest point, where the neck meets the shoulder ridge. The Krillian armor plates don't connect completely at the joints, and Vexians can't track objects that move directly behind their head crest." Carson nodded slightly, committing the details to memory while scanning the assembled crowd. Master Krelig sat in a prominent position on the observation platform, surrounded by senior instructors from various species. Among them, senior instructor Karak's watched with barely concealed anticipation, clearly expecting a humiliation rather than a demonstration. "Time to go," Reeves said quietly. Remember the mission, Colonel. This isn't about winning at all costs. It's about demonstrating that humans have valuable combat traditions worth respect and study. Understood, Commander. Carson straightened his simple training uniform, a black GI-style outfit that allowed maximum mobility. Dignity and competence, not dominance. As Carson walked to the center of the arena, he felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon him. This moment would shape perceptions of humanity within the Academy, potentially influencing Earth's standing in the broader alliance. It was in many ways more significant than any battlefield he had faced before. Master Krelig rose from his seat, his voice amplified throughout the arena. Today we observe a demonstration of Earth combat methodologies represented by Colonel James Carson. 3 assessment exercises will be conducted with junior instructors to evaluate potential contributions to our curriculum. The crowd's murmuring increased as a draconian entered the arena, younger than Karax, but clearly skilled, moving with the fluid grace characteristic of his species. He wore the insignia of a junior instructor, confirming Reeves' prediction. First assessment, reflexive response techniques, Krelig announced. Junior instructor Cyrex will evaluate the human's speed capabilities. The draconian approached the center of the arena, offering Carson the minimal greeting protocol required. I will attempt non-injurious striking patterns, he stated, his translated voice carrying a note of condescension. Defend yourself as best you can, human. Carson returned the greeting with perfect form. I understand, junior instructor. I am ready. And they took positions at the center of the arena, and Krelig gave the signal to begin. What followed was exactly what Carson had anticipated, a showcase of draconian speed. Cyrex moved like lightning, his strikes coming from multiple angles in combinations too fast for most beings to track. But Carson didn't attempt to match that speed. Instead, he employed principles of anticipation and efficient movement, minimal shifts that placed him just beyond the draconian's reach. Where Cyrex committed fully to each strike, Carson remained economical, conserving energy, and waiting for the inevitable pattern to emerge. The crowd's initial excitement gave way to confusion. The human wasn't being overwhelmed as expected. He wasn't even striking back, just avoiding damage with uncanny precision. After 2 minutes of increasingly frustrated attacks, Cyrex overextended on a lunging strike. Carson finally moved offensively, not with a powerful counterattack, but with a precise finger strike to the thoracic junction Chen had identified. The draconian's right arm went momentarily limp, throwing him off balance. Carson stepped back immediately, making no attempt to press his advantage. The message was clear. He could have continued, but chose restraint. Cyrex regained his composure, confusion evident in his expression. He had expected to dominate, not to be countered so effectively. After a moment's hesitation, he offered the formal gesture, signifying the end of an assessment. Assessment complete. Krelig announced, his tone neutral, but his good eye narrowed with interest. Second evaluation, resistance techniques. The next opponent was predictably a Krillian smaller than Krelig, but still towering over Carson, natural armor plates gleaming under the arena lights. This junior instructor approached with obvious confidence, clearly believing his natural protection and superior strength would easily overcome the human. Junior instructor Brack will assess the human's defensive capabilities against power techniques, Krelig stated. The Krillian didn't bother with pleasantries. Prepare yourself, human. I will demonstrate proper application of force. When the signal came, Brack charged forward with surprising speed for his size, clearly intending to overwhelm Carson with pure power. Again, Carson made no attempt to match his opponent's natural advantage. Instead, he employed classic judo principles, redirection rather than opposition, balance disruption rather than force against force. As Brack lunged with a powerful strike, Carson stepped to the side and guided the Krillian's momentum, adding his own subtle direction to send the massive alien tumbling across the arena floor. The crowd gasped collectively. The sight of a Krillian being thrown by a physically smaller opponent was shocking. Brack rose quickly, anger evident in his posture. His next attacks came with greater intensity, but each time Carson used the Krillian's own momentum in weight against him. After the third throw, this one executed with a classic hip rotation that sent Brack crashing down particularly hard. Krelig signaled the end of the assessment. The arena had grown noticeably quieter. The expected humiliation of the human was not materializing. Instead, Carson was demonstrating combat principles that transcended physical limitations, techniques based on leverage, timing, and precision rather than raw power or speed. Final assessment multi-vector response, Krelig announced. Junior instructor Zillith will evaluate adaptability to complex attack patterns. The Vexian that entered the arena moved with the distinctive grace of its species, four arms constantly in motion, as if practicing strikes even while approaching. Carson recognized the challenge immediately. How could a two-armed human possibly defend against or counter a four-armed opponent with superior coordination? When the signal came, Zillith attacked with all four arms, simultaneously creating a bewildering pattern of strikes that seemed impossible to track, let alone defend against. This time Carson employed principles from Wing Chun and Aikido, controlling the center line, maintaining proper distance, and most importantly, recognizing that defending against all four limbs individually was impossible. Instead, he focused on the Vexian's core, the central mass from which all limbs extended. By controlling his position relative to that core, Carson negated the advantage of multiple limbs. He moved inside the Vexian's optimal striking distance, too close for its long arms to generate power, and employed short, precise strikes to disrupt its balance and coordination. The crowd's murmuring grew louder as the assessment continued. Carson was not merely surviving, he was effectively demonstrating a counter to one of the most significant advantages certain Alliance species possessed over humans. After several minutes during which Zillith became visibly frustrated by its inability to overwhelm the human, Krelig signaled the end of the demonstration. Carson stepped back and bowed respectfully to his opponent, then turned and bowed to Master Krelig. The arena fell silent, waiting for the Master's assessment. Krelig rose slowly, his one good eye fixed on Carson. The human has demonstrated unexpected adaptability. He stated each word measured carefully. Colonel Carson employs techniques based on efficiency and precision rather than natural physical advantages. This approach merits further study. From his position beside Krelig, Senior Instructor Karax leaned forward, clearly displeased with the outcome. Master Krelig, with respect, these demonstrations were limited in scope. They do not truly test combat effectiveness in realistic scenarios. Krelig considered this objection for a moment. Your point has merit, Senior Instructor Karax. Perhaps a more comprehensive evaluation is warranted. He turned his attention back to Carson. Colonel Carson, do you accept a final assessment, one opponent unrestricted techniques within safety protocols? Carson recognized the escalation for what it was, the Draconians pushing for a more decisive confrontation. But he also recognized the opportunity it presented to cement humanity's standing. I accept, Master Krelig. As a representative of Earth, I welcome any opportunity to exchange knowledge with Alliance instructors. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. The human was either very confident or very foolish to accept such an open challenge. Krelig nodded once, then gestured toward the observation platform where the senior instructor sat. Senior Instructor Karax has expressed particular interest in human combat methodologies. Perhaps he would honor us by conducting this final assessment personally. The Draconian's expression shifted rapidly from satisfaction to wariness. He had hoped to nominate a specialized combatant, not participate himself. But with the eyes of the Academy upon him, refusal would be interpreted as weakness or fear. I accept the honor, Master Krelig, Karax replied, rising from his seat. As the Draconian descended to the arena floor, Carson centered himself mentally. This confrontation had just transformed from a simple demonstration into a pivotal moment for Earth's standing. Karax was not merely a skilled warrior. He was a political figure within the Academy, one who had been actively working against human integration into Alliance structures. Reeves approached quickly before Karax reached the arena center. This is a setup, she whispered urgently. Karax is their champion, undefeated in 17 formal matches. Then he's overdue for a lesson in humility, Carson replied calmly. Don't worry, Commander. I've faced worse odds. As Karax took his position, his reptilian features set in a mask of determined superiority, Carson allowed himself a moment of perfect clarity, the same mental state he had achieved before critical missions throughout his military career. Everything peripheral faded away. The crowd, the politics, the broader implications all receded, leaving only the immediate tactical situation. Karax was powerful, fast, and highly trained. He would expect Carson to be defensive, to rely on the same evasive techniques he had demonstrated against the junior instructors. The key would be to surprise him, to attack rather than defend, but in a way unique to human combat traditions. Begin, Krelig commanded, and Karax launched forward with explosive speed. The battle that followed would be discussed in academy circles for years to come. Where the junior instructors had employed textbook techniques, Karax unleashed a personalized combat style that blended multiple traditions with his natural abilities. His strikes came from impossible angles, his footwork created deceptive distance changes, and his experience showed in every calculated movement. But Carson did not retreat. He advanced employing pressure and timing to disrupt Karax's rhythm. Where the Draconian expected defensive reactions, Carson offered offensive pressure. Where Karax anticipated fear, he encountered calculated aggression tempered by precision. The crowd fell silent, transfixed by the unexpected spectacle. The elderly human was not merely surviving against one of the Academy's champions, he was controlling the engagement through superior tactics and technique. When the end came, it happened so quickly, many observers missed the critical sequence. Karax, frustrated by his inability to overwhelm Carson, committed fully to a complex attack combination. Carson, having identified the pattern in Karax's previous movements, timed his counter perfectly, a subtle shift, a precise strike to a nerve cluster, and a sweeping leg movement that exploited the Draconian's forward momentum. Karax went down hard, his balance completely disrupted. Before he could recover, Carson had secured a controlling position, applying precise pressure to key points that immobilized the Draconian without causing injury. The arena erupted in a cacophony of reactions: shock, disbelief, excitement, and outrage depending on the observer's species and political alignment. Carson immediately released Karax once the victory was clear, stepping back and offering the formal gesture of respect due to a worthy opponent. Karax rose slowly, his expression unreadable to most human observers, but showing clear signs of shock to those familiar with Draconian physiology. He returned the gesture of respect with visible reluctance before turning and walking stiffly from the arena. Master Krelig stood raising a hand for silence. The arena gradually quieted as all attention turned to the Krillian master. "The demonstration is concluded," he announced. "Colonel Carson has shown that human combat methodologies contain principles worthy of study within our academy. Beginning tomorrow, he will be granted junior instructor status with authority to conduct training sessions in human combat techniques for interested students." As murmurs spread through the crowd, Krelig fixed his good eye directly on Carson. "You have earned a place at our academy, Colonel. Now we shall see what you do with it." The statement carried unmistakable layers of meaning, acknowledgement of Carson's skill, warning about the responsibilities that came with it, and perhaps most importantly, recognition that this was merely the first step in a longer journey to secure humanity's standing within the Alliance. As Carson left the arena, Reeves and Chen fell in beside him, their expressions a mixture of elation and concern. "That was unexpected," Chen admitted quietly. "You just defeated one of their champions in front of the entire academy." "Which makes you both a sensation and a target," Reeves added grimly. "Every ambitious student will want to test themselves against you now, and Karax won't forget this humiliation." Carson nodded, accepting both the victory and its consequences. "Then we better prepare for tomorrow. If I'm going to be teaching, I'll need a curriculum that showcases human combat principles in their best light." As they walked through corridors now filled with aliens watching him with new interest, Carson remained outwardly calm. But inwardly he recognized the significance of what had just occurred. Today, one human had demonstrated that Earth deserved respect. Tomorrow would begin the harder task of translating that respect into political capital that might secure humanity's future among the stars. The real mission was just beginning. Word spread quickly through the academy. By the next morning, when Carson arrived at the small section allocated for Earth combat training, he found a crowd already waiting. Students from a dozen different species stood in disciplined formation, their diverse physiologies creating a striking visual tableau against the backdrop of the training area. "Quite the turnout," Commander Reeves murmured as they surveyed the assembled aliens. "Looks like you made an impression yesterday." Carson nodded slightly, his expression remaining composed despite his surprise at the numbers. He had expected interest after his demonstration, but not on this scale, not this quickly. Among the gathered students, he recognized the young Altarian he had observed previously, the one with silvery blue skin, who had demonstrated such fluid defensive movements. Standing near the back was the elderly Vexian instructor Zilox, his compound eyes gleaming with what might have been amusement at the scene. Most surprising was the presence of a Krillian student, unusual given their species' general disdain for lesser combat traditions. This particular Krillian appeared younger than most. Carson had encountered, their armor plates not yet fully developed around the joints. Your first official class as a junior instructor, Reeves continued. Any nerves? Carson allowed himself a small smile. I've briefed presidents and led men into combat. Teaching a few interested aliens should be manageable. He stepped forward to address the gathered students, noting how many of them straightened to attention at his approach, a sign of respect he hadn't expected after just one demonstration. Welcome, he began, his translator, converting his words into the various languages needed. I am Colonel Carson, Earth Combat Instructor. Before we begin, I should clarify what Earth martial arts are and what they are not. The students remained silent, watching with varying expressions of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. Earth has no natural advantages in the galactic arena. Carson continued, pacing slowly before them. No natural armor, no multiple limbs, no specialized sensory organs. Our planet's high gravity and predatory environment forced us to develop combat techniques based on efficiency rather than physical superiority. He paused, letting his gaze move across the assembled aliens. What I will teach you is not about being stronger or faster than your opponent. It's about understanding principles, leverage timing, and anatomy psychology, about turning an opponent's advantages into vulnerabilities. The young Altarian stepped forward slightly. Is that how you defeated Senior Instructor Karax, by using his own advantages against him? Carson studied the young alien. Up close, he could see that what he had taken for youth might actually be a gender difference. The Altarian appeared female by human standards, though he knew such distinctions were often more complex in alien physiologies. Partly, he acknowledged, Karax expected me to fight defensively because of his superior speed and reach. When I pressed forward instead, it disrupted his strategy. Carson addressed the wider group again. The first principle of Earth combat: never do what your opponent expects. For the next hour, Carson led the diverse group through basic principles common to multiple Earth martial arts. He demonstrated how leverage could overcome superior strength, how timing could counter superior speed, and how proper positioning could neutralize the advantage of multiple limbs or natural weapons. The students proved remarkably adaptable. The young Altarian, who introduced herself as Terra, showed particular aptitude for the fluid movements of Aikido. The Krillian student struggled with concepts of redirecting force rather than meeting it directly, but persisted with surprising determination. As the session progressed, Carson noticed several senior instructors observing from the periphery, including surprisingly Master Krelig himself. The old Krillian's expression remained unreadable, but the fact that he bothered to observe at all suggested significant interest. When the training period ended, most students departed with formal expressions of gratitude, but Tara lingered, approaching Carson with the characteristic grace of her species. Your techniques complement Altarian flow forms, she said, her translated voice melodic, but you incorporate something we do not: anticipation of hostility, rather than merely responding to it. Carson nodded. Earth has a long history of conflict. Our techniques evolved not just for harmony, but for survival. I would like to learn more, she said directly. Beyond the group sessions, my people have abilities that might benefit from your approach. Before Carson could respond, Commander Reeves stepped closer. Altarians are empathic sensitives, she explained quietly. They can sense emotional states in most species. Carson considered this information carefully. That would be a significant advantage in combat, knowing what your opponent intends before they move. It is considered dishonorable to use sensitivity in combat. Tara admitted, her luminescent eyes downcast, which is why many view my people as unsuited for security roles. She looked up at Carson with sudden intensity. But you taught today that advantages can become vulnerabilities. Perhaps limitations can become strengths. The strategic implications were immediately clear to Carson. An alliance with the Altarians, a species with diplomatic weight in the alliance due to their empathic abilities, could be valuable for Earth's position. I would be honored to work with you individually, he told her. Perhaps we can schedule sessions during free training periods. Tara's skin brightened noticeably, an indication of pleasure Carson had learned from his studies. She offered the formal Altarian gesture of respect before departing. As the training area cleared, the elderly Vexian instructor Zilox approached. His multiple limbs moved with the slight stiffness of age, but his eyes remained alert and evaluative. An impressive first session, Colonel, he clicked. You've attracted quite the diverse following already. I noticed you observing Instructor Zilox. Did you find anything of value in Earth techniques? The Vexian's mandibles moved in what Carson had come to recognize as amusement. I am too old to adopt new forms, but not too old to appreciate wisdom when I see it. You taught principles today, not merely movements. That is the mark of a true combat master. Carson inclined his head at the compliment. High praise from a veteran of your experience. Not praise observation. Zilox moved closer, lowering his voice despite the emptying training area. You have made an impact quickly, too quickly for some tastes. Be wary, Colonel. The Draconian delegation views your success as a threat to their petition against Earth. Politics, Carson sighed. Some things are universal, it seems. Indeed, and in politics, as in combat, one must watch for attacks from unexpected directions. Zilox's compound eyes shifted, scanning the area before continuing. There are rumors of a faction within the Academy, those who believe certain species should remain contained. They call themselves the Shadow Council, though officially they do not exist. Carson kept his expression neutral, despite the significance of this information. And you believe they may target me as Earth's representative. I believe, Zilox replied carefully, that your demonstration yesterday disrupted certain long-standing narratives about hierarchy among species. Those who benefit from such narratives rarely surrender them willingly. The Vexian straightened, resuming a more formal posture. Merely something to consider as you continue your work here, Colonel. The next 3 weeks saw Carson's influence grow steadily throughout the Academy. His training sessions expanded from one small class to 4 larger ones, each tailored to different species' physiological capabilities. Word spread about the effectiveness of Earth combat principles against supposedly superior opponents, drawing students from increasingly diverse backgrounds. Most significantly, several mid-level instructors from other species began incorporating elements of human techniques into their own training programs, a profound complement in the tradition-bound academy. Even senior instructor Carax, while maintaining public disdain for primitive human methods, was observed studying recordings of Carson's demonstrations. The young Altarian Tara had become Carson's most dedicated student, mastering human combat principles with remarkable speed. Their private training sessions had evolved into a genuine exchange of knowledge, Carson teaching her earth martial arts, while she helped him understand the complex emotional and political undercurrents of the academy. The Draconians are growing concerned, she informed him during one such session, her silvery blue skin glistening with exertion after a particularly intense practice. Their petition to reclassify Earth was expected to pass without significant opposition. Your presence has complicated matters. Carson nodded, wiping sweat from his brow with a small towel. Despite the Academy's lighter gravity, the training regimen he maintained was rigorous, especially for a man his age. Good. Complications buy time, and time favors Earth in this situation. But it also makes you a target, Tara cautioned, her luminescent eyes serious. I sense hostility growing among certain factions. Not just disagreement, actual enmity. Zilox mentioned something similar. This Shadow Council he referenced. Have you heard of them? Tara's skin darkened slightly, a sign of concern or fear in Altarian physiology. Only in whispers. My people avoid direct involvement in such matters, but... She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. But what? Carson prompted gently. I've sensed gatherings, concealed emotions, minds shielded in ways that suggest coordination and secrecy. She looked directly at Carson. Yesterday I felt something more specific. Focused intent directed toward you. Malicious intent. Carson absorbed this information with the calm assessment of a veteran soldier. Threat identification was familiar territory, even if the specific nature of this threat remained unclear. Have you told anyone else about this? She shook her head. Altarians are expected to remain neutral in academy politics. Using our abilities to expose hidden agendas would be problematic for my position here. I understand and I appreciate your warning. Carson placed a reassuring hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture he had learned was acceptable in Altarian culture between teacher and student. Continue as normal. Don't draw attention to yourself by appearing too closely associated with Earth's interests. As the day of the Festival of Unity approached, Carson was summoned to Master Krellig's private quarters, an unprecedented honor for a junior instructor. The ancient Krillian was meditating alone when Carson arrived, his massive form suspended in a gravity manipulation field that eased the strain on his aging joints. "Colonel Carson," Krellig rumbled, not opening his eyes, "you have caused quite the stir in my academy." Carson remained at formal attention. "That was not my intention, Master Krellig." Intentions rarely match outcomes in matters of significance. The gravity field diminished gradually, allowing Krellig to settle to the floor with dignified slowness. "I have been monitoring your classes. Your methods are unorthodox by Alliance standards." "Earth evolved in isolation from the Alliance," Carson replied. "Our approaches developed to address our specific challenges." Krellig's good eye fixed on Carson with penetrating intensity. "You teach concepts that some would consider dangerous if widely adopted. The notion that supposed weaknesses can become strengths, that established hierarchies of ability can be overcome through technique and strategy. These ideas have implications beyond mere combat." Carson recognized the subtext immediately. This wasn't just about martial arts techniques. It was about the broader political implications for species like humans within the Alliance structure. "Truth is rarely comfortable, Master Krellig, especially for those who benefit from existing misconceptions." The Krillian made a sound that might have been a laugh, a rough grinding noise. "Direct as always, Colonel, a trait I find refreshing even when I disagree with the content." He moved to a wall panel, activating a security protocol that Carson's translator identified as a privacy measure. "What I tell you now does not leave this room," Krellig said, his voice lower. "I have lived long enough to see patterns repeat themselves throughout Alliance history. When new species join, particularly those with unconventional capabilities, certain factions inevitably resist. They fear change. They fear losing position and privilege." "The Shadow Council," Carson ventured. Krellig's eye narrowed. "You are well informed for one so new to our society. Yes, though they have had many names throughout our history, always operating in darkness, always claiming to protect traditional values while serving their own interests. And where do you stand in this conflict?" "Master Krellig." The ancient Krillian was silent for a long moment, his armored plates shifting slightly with each breath. "I stand with the Academy Colonel, with knowledge and progress, not fear and stagnation. You may find this surprising, but I was among those who first advocated for Earth's inclusion in the Alliance. Not publicly, of course. My position demands certain appearances of neutrality, but I recognize the potential in your species from the preliminary reports." Carson couldn't hide his surprise. "You supported Earth's admission even though you've maintained public skepticism?" "Politics, Colonel, complex and often contradictory." Krellig moved closer, his massive form looming over Carson. "I have enemies within the Council who watch my every move. My open support would have damaged Earth's prospects more than helped them. Sometimes opposition serves as better cover for assistance." The revelation shifted Carson's understanding of the Academy's politics entirely. Krellig wasn't merely an impartial arbiter, he was a strategic ally who had been operating behind the scenes all along. "The Festival of Unity is tomorrow," Krellig continued. "You have been granted a demonstration slot, the first time a species so new to the Alliance has received such an honor." This was not a coincidence. "You arranged it," Carson realized. "Let us say I did not oppose it as vigorously as some expected." Krellig's good eye gleamed with something like mischief. "The diplomatic observers who attend the festival will report directly to their governments before the Council vote. An impressive demonstration of human combat philosophy could significantly influence perceptions." "And the Shadow Council, will they allow this opportunity to proceed unchallenged?" Krellig's expression darkened. "That is unlikely. They recognize the potential impact as clearly as I do. Be vigilant, Colonel. The attack, when it comes, will be designed to humiliate not just you, but Earth itself." As Carson left Krellig's quarters, his mind raced with implications. The political landscape was more complex and potentially more favorable than he had realized. But the warning about the festival was clear. Whatever the Shadow Council planned, he needed to be prepared. The day of the festival arrived with the Academy transformed. Ceremonial decorations from dozens of Alliance cultures adorned the corridors and public spaces. Diplomatic vessels docked at the station, bringing observers from across Alliance space to witness the cultural displays. Carson spent the morning in meditation, centering himself for the responsibility that lay ahead. He had selected a sequence of movements that showcased the evolution of Earth martial arts, from ancient forms to modern combat applications emphasizing efficiency, precision, and adaptability rather than raw power or speed. Commander Reeves entered his quarters as he completed his preparations, her expression serious. The diplomatic section is filling up. Representatives from at least 30 Alliance worlds, including 3 council members, with votes on Earth status. Carson nodded, continuing to wrap his hands with traditional cloth bindings, a symbolic gesture connecting him to Earth's martial heritage. Any security concerns? Nothing specific, but Chen detected unusual communication patterns among certain Draconian staff last night. Could be nothing, could be something. She hesitated briefly. Your student, Tara, was looking for you earlier. Said she needed to speak with you before the demonstration. Before Carson could respond, the Academy's announcement system activated. Attention all personnel. The Festival of Unity ceremonies will commence in 30 minutes. Participants should proceed to their designated preparation areas. I'll find Tara on my way, Carson assured Reeves as he stood performing a final check of his simple black GI. No rank indicators, no decorations, just the Earth emblem on the left breast. Is there anything else I should know before I go? Just that this matters, Colonel, really matters. The diplomatic observers today will report directly to their governments before the council vote next week. This is our last best chance to shift perceptions. No pressure then, Carson replied with a slight smile. Don't worry, Commander. I've performed under worse conditions than this. As he made his way through the increasingly crowded corridors toward the main arena, Carson maintained the calm focus that had served him through decades of military service. Every mission had its critical moment, the point where preparation met opportunity, where success or failure hung in the balance. Today's demonstration represented that moment for Earth's future in the Alliance. He found Tara waiting near the participant preparation area, her silvery blue skin darker than usual, a sign of distress in Altarians. Colonel Carson, she said as he approached, her luminescent eyes darting nervously to nearby aliens before focusing on him. I needed to warn you, I've sensed something. Dangerous. Concentrated malice directed toward your demonstration. Carson drew her slightly aside, speaking quietly. Can you be more specific, individuals' intentions? She shook her head in frustration. It's fragmented, deliberately shielded from empathic detection, but something is planned during your presentation. Something meant to humiliate Earth, or worse. I understand. Thank you for the warning. He placed a reassuring hand briefly on her shoulder. Return to your section now. Don't draw attention to yourself or your connection to me. As Tara departed, Carson continued to the preparation area, his mind analyzing potential threats and countermeasures. The festival's security would be focused on protecting dignitaries, not participants. If someone wanted to disrupt Earth's demonstration or harm its representative, they would find opportunities. Master Krelig was reviewing the ceremony order when Carson arrived, surrounded by senior instructors from various species. The Krillian acknowledged Carson's presence with a slight nod. Colonel Carson, Earth's demonstration is scheduled 9th in the sequence following the Altarian flowing forms and preceding the Krillian power disciplines. You will have precisely 10 minutes as agreed. Thank you, Master Krelig. I am prepared. From the corner of his eye, Carson noticed Senior Instructor Karax watching him with undisguised contempt. The Draconian had avoided direct confrontation since their arena match, but his opposition to Earth's inclusion in the festival had been vocal and persistent. As the participants moved toward the main arena for the opening ceremonies, Carson spotted Zilox among a group of elder instructors. The Vexian made a subtle gesture with his lower left limb, a warning signal Carson recognized from their previous conversations. The arena itself had been transformed for the festival. Seating for thousands surrounded the central performance area, now decorated with symbols representing the major Alliance species. Above the main floor, a special observation platform held the diplomatic contingent beings of various physiologies dressed in formal attire that marked their official status. Carson took his place among the participants, representing Earth alone, while other species had multiple instructors present. The ceremonial procession began, each delegation entering the arena to the sound of traditional music from their homeworld. As Earth's representative, Carson walked alone when his turn came, moving with the dignified bearing of a career military officer. The music accompanying him, selected by Dr. Chen from Earth's classical traditions, carried notes of both solemnity and strength. The opening rituals proceeded according to tradition, with Master Krelig offering formal welcomes in the ancient language of the Alliance founders. Carson observed carefully, noting the positions of security personnel, the reactions of diplomatic observers, and any unusual movements among the attendees. The demonstrations began with the founding species of the Alliance forms so ancient their original martial applications had evolved into pure artistic expression. Each performance received formal acknowledgement from the assembled dignitaries, the ritual emphasizing the unity and shared heritage that supposedly bound the diverse alliance together. As the sequence progressed toward Earth's position, Carson centered himself with controlled breathing techniques. Tara's warning suggested some form of planned disruption, but its nature remained unclear. He would need to be prepared for anything from technical sabotage to direct intervention. The Altarian demonstration concluded to appreciative acknowledgement, their flowing movements having created patterns of light and color through their natural bioluminescence. As they exited the performance area, the announcement system activated. Representing Earth, Colonel James Carson will now demonstrate traditional human combat forms. Carson moved to the center of the arena with measured steps, conscious of the thousands of eyes upon him. He assumed the opening stance of the sequence. He had prepared a deliberate blend of ancient kata and modern combat positioning that embodied the evolution of Earth martial arts. The first movements were slow, deliberate, showcasing the controlled power and precision that formed the foundation of human combat philosophy. As the sequence progressed, the movements increased in speed and complexity, demonstrating the principles of efficiency and adaptability that Carson had emphasized in his classes. He had completed approximately half of his planned demonstration when he sensed, rather than saw, movement at the edge of his peripheral vision. Something out of place, a disruption in the carefully controlled environment of the ceremony. Without breaking the flow of his movements, Carson adjusted his position slightly to better observe the disturbance. Three figures were moving against the choreographed patterns of the festival staff Draconians, dressed as security personnel, but moving with the focused intent of trained operatives. They were converging on his position from different angles, their timing coordinated to intercept him at the most complex portion of his demonstration. Their intent was clear: to disrupt Earth's moment before the gathered diplomats, to create an incident that would reinforce perceptions of human inadequacy. Carson continued his demonstration without visible reaction, his mind calculating options. To acknowledge the threat would play into their strategy, creating exactly the kind of disruption they sought. To ignore it might allow a more damaging intervention. The decision formed in an instant. He would incorporate their attack into his demonstration, turning their disruption into an unintended showcase of human combat effectiveness. The first Draconian reached him just as he transitioned into a sequence of defensive movements. The timing was almost perfect, as if the universe itself had choreographed this confrontation. The attacker launched forward, clearly expecting to catch Carson mid-form and off balance. Instead, Carson's movements flowed seamlessly from demonstration to application. The defensive position absorbed and redirected the Draconian's momentum, sending him tumbling across the arena floor without Carson appearing to exert significant force. The crowd's reaction was immediate gasps and murmurs, as what had appeared to be a formal demonstration suddenly transformed into actual combat. Security personnel started forward, but hesitated, confused by the unfolding situation. The second and third attackers moved in simultaneously, likely assuming Carson would be focused on their fallen comrade. It was a tactical error, born of underestimation, exactly the kind of mistake Carson had warned about in his classes. What followed was not the disruption the attackers had planned, but rather the most compelling demonstration of human combat effectiveness possible. Carson moved with the fluid precision of decades of training, his aging body transcending its limitations through perfect technique and timing. One attacker found himself locked in a joint manipulation that rendered him immobile despite his superior strength. The other was countered with a precise strike to a pressure point that temporarily paralyzed his dominant arm. In less than 20 seconds, all three would-be disruptors were neutralized, not through brutal force, but through the very principles of efficiency and leverage that Carson had been demonstrating moments before. The arena fell completely silent as Carson returned to the center of the performance area. Without comment or explanation, he resumed his demonstration from precisely the point where it had been interrupted, completing the planned sequence with the same measured control as before. When he finished the final movement and assumed the closing position, the silence held for a heartbeat longer, then erupted into a thunderous response that transcended species barriers. What had begun as a formal cultural exhibition had transformed into something unprecedented in festival history, a real-time demonstration of combat effectiveness that no choreographed performance could have matched. Master Krelig rose from his ceremonial position, raising a hand for silence. As the arena gradually quieted, the Krillian master's voice carried through the amplification system. "The demonstration from Earth has concluded," he stated formally, though with a subtle inflection that suggested more significance than the words conveyed. "Security will escort the unauthorized participants from the arena." As official security personnel moved to take custody of the three Draconians, Carson exited the performance area according to protocol. In the preparation corridor beyond, he found Commander Reeves waiting, her expression a mixture of shock and elation. "That was—" She seemed to struggle for words. "Did you plan that?" "Hardly," Carson replied dryly. "Though I was warned something might occur." "The diplomatic observers were impressed," she informed him. "I could see their reactions from my position. Especially the Altarian contingent, they were practically glowing." Before Carson could respond, Master Krelig appeared in the corridor, his massive frame blocking the light momentarily. The ancient Krillian's expression remained unreadable, but his posture suggested urgency. "Colonel Carson, your presence is requested immediately in the diplomatic section. The Altarian representatives wish to speak with you before departing." Carson followed Krelig through secured corridors to a private meeting chamber where three Altarian diplomats awaited their skin tones ranging from deep azure to pale silver. The eldest, whose skin had faded to an almost translucent white, stepped forward. "Colonel Carson of Earth," the elder Altarian said, her voice carrying the melodic quality characteristic of her species. "Your demonstration was most illuminating." Carson offered the formal Altarian greeting he had learned from Terra. "I am honored by your attention, diplomatic elder." "The honor is mutual." She gestured for him to sit. "What happened today was no mere disruption, Colonel. It was a calculated attempt to undermine Earth's standing before the Council vote. An attempt that failed spectacularly, I might add." "The Shadow Council's work, we believe," added another Altarian, his skin a deep blue that suggested senior rank. "They have opposed Earth's full membership from the beginning. They fear what humans represent," the elder continued. "A species without natural advantages who nonetheless develop methods to overcome supposed superiority. Your demonstration today proved their fears well-founded." Carson considered his response carefully. "Earth seeks only equal standing within the alliance, not dominance or special privilege." "A wise position," the elder acknowledged, "but perhaps an incomplete one. Your species has much to offer the alliance perspectives and approaches that our collective has lacked." She leaned forward slightly. "The Altarian consensus has been undecided regarding Earth's petition for full membership. Until today, the implications were clear. Earth had gained a powerful ally for the upcoming council vote. Before Carson could express gratitude, alarms blared throughout the academy. The security system's automated voice announced a Level 1 alert, the highest possible emergency designation. Krelig moved immediately to a communication panel, his massive form tense with sudden alertness. After a brief exchange with security personnel, he turned back to the gathered diplomats. His good eye narrowed with concern. "The central control systems have been compromised," he rumbled. "Security barriers between sectors are failing. All diplomatic personnel must proceed to emergency shelters immediately." The Altarian elder rose with surprising speed for her apparent age. "This is no coincidence, coming immediately after the demonstration. The Shadow Council is making its final move." "Against Earth?" Carson asked. "Against change itself," she replied grimly. "Against the threat you represent to their established order." As security personnel arrived to escort the Altarian diplomats to safety, Krelig pulled Carson aside. The attack is more sophisticated than anything we've encountered before, the master instructor growled. Multiple systems compromised simultaneously, access to secured areas. This was planned and executed by professionals. What's their objective? Carson asked, his military mind already analyzing potential targets and vulnerabilities. Unknown, but the timing suggests Krelig was interrupted by another alarm, this one more urgent than the first. His expression shifted to one Carson hadn't seen before. Genuine fear. Yes. They've accessed the gravitational stabilizers, Krelig stated flatly. If those fail, catastrophic structural damage will follow. Thousands could die. Carson processed this information with the cold efficiency of a combat veteran. Where are the manual overrides? Central engineering level 6, but it's sealed off. The security barriers are in lockdown mode. There must be alternative access routes, maintenance tunnels, emergency passages. Krelig studied Carson for a moment. There are hazardous ones, not designed for beings your size. Show me, Carson demanded, already moving toward the exit. I have experience with tight spaces. Yes, Krelig said, a new understanding in his voice. The Green Berets, Special Forces, your file mentioned your specialized training, but not the full extent of your operations. Carson stopped short. My file is classified. Even Alliance intelligence shouldn't have access to my covert missions. Earth's government provided selective information, Krelig admitted. But I have lived long enough to recognize a warrior with secrets, Colonel. Your movements, your awareness, your analytical approach, these speak of training beyond conventional military service. There was no time to question how Krelig had deduced his classified background. Carson nodded once, confirming without elaborating. Then you know I'm qualified for this. Now show me the access route. As they raced through increasingly chaotic corridors, Tara suddenly appeared from a side passage, her silvery blue skin pulsing with agitation. Colonel Carson, she called, I sensed your presence. The attackers, they're targeting the diplomatic section directly. I can feel their hostile intent. Carson looked at Krelig. Change of plans. You get to central engineering. I'll handle the diplomatic section. Impossible, Krelig growled. Security barriers have sealed that entire level. Even I cannot override them now. There's a way through the central ventilation system, Tara interjected. It's tight, but an Altarian or human could navigate it. Show me, Carson commanded, and Tara led them to a maintenance access panel hidden behind decorative paneling. I'm coming with you, she insisted, as Carson prepared to enter the narrow passage. Too dangerous, he countered. These aren't students or demonstrators, they're trained operatives. I can sense their positions through the walls, she argued. Without me, you'll be navigating blind. Carson recognized the logic in her argument, much as he disliked involving a civilian or whatever the academy equivalent might be. Stay behind me at all times. Follow my signals precisely. As they disappeared into the ventilation system, Krelig called after them. I'll get to central engineering. Buy us time, Colonel. The fate of more than just Earth may depend on it. The ventilation system was as restrictive as promised, barely wide enough for Carson's shoulders, requiring him to shimmy forward in a modified military crawl he hadn't used since infiltrating North Korean bunkers decades earlier. Tara followed silently, her slender form more suited to the confined space. 3 hostiles ahead, she whispered after they had navigated several junctions. 2 Draconians, 1, something else. Shielded emotions. Difficult to read. Carson nodded, processing the tactical situation. Distance in armament. 20 meters. The passageway opens into a security station overlooking the diplomatic chambers. They have energy weapons of some kind. Powerful. Emotions. Carson asked, knowing Tara's unique abilities. Cold. Determined. No hesitation or uncertainty. She paused. Professional. Just as he had suspected. This wasn't a spontaneous disruption, but a calculated operation with specific objectives. The question was what those objectives might be and who had authorized them. They reached a grating that overlooked the security station. Below, Carson could see the 3 figures. Tara had sensed 2 Draconians in unmarked combat gear and a third figure whose species he couldn't immediately identify. All were armed with Alliance military-grade weaponry. Stay here, Carson whispered to Tara. No matter what happens, do not reveal yourself. Before she could protest, he had already calculated his approach. The ventilation grate was secured with standard fasteners easy enough to remove silently with the multi-tool he always carried. The drop was approximately 3 meters manageable with proper technique. The hostiles were focused on monitoring equipment, their attention directed away from the ceiling. It would be 3 against 1 with Carson unarmed against energy weapons. The odds weren't ideal, but he'd faced worse during his Special Forces days. Sometimes the element of surprise was the only advantage you needed. With practiced efficiency, Carson removed the grate silently and positioned himself for the drop. He took one final centering breath, then launched himself through the opening. He landed directly behind the unidentified hostile, executing a perfect chokehold before the being could react. The Draconian spun weapons raising, but Carson was already using the incapacitated hostile as a shield while simultaneously kicking one Draconian's weapon from his grip. What followed was a textbook application of the principles Carson had been teaching: economy of motion, leveraging opponents' strengths against them, precision over power. Within seconds, one Draconian was unconscious from a pressure point strike. The other found himself disarmed and immobilized against a console, Carson's forearm pressed against his throat. "Who sent you?" Carson demanded, applying just enough pressure to make breathing difficult but not impossible. "The Shadow Council sends its regards." The Draconian hissed, his reptilian eyes filled with hatred. "Earth will never." The rest of his sentence was cut short as the entire section shuddered violently. Emergency lights activated as the main illumination failed, bathing the security station in pulsing red. "They've initiated the gravitational destabilization." The Draconian laughed despite his precarious position. "Too late, human. Too late to stop what's coming." Carson rendered him unconscious with a precise strike, then moved to the security console. The displays showed critical systems failing across multiple sectors. Worse, the diplomatic chamber's protective barriers were disengaging, leaving the Alliance representatives vulnerable to the vacuum of space if the structural integrity fields collapsed. "Tara," he called, and the young Altarian dropped gracefully from the ventilation shaft. "Can you operate this system?" She moved quickly to the console, her slender fingers dancing across the interface. "Partially. I can reroute emergency power to the diplomatic chamber's shields, but I can't stop the gravitational destabilization." "Do it," Carson ordered. "Keep the diplomats safe while I find a way to central engineering." As Tara worked, Carson secured the unconscious hostiles with restraints from their own equipment. The facility shuddered again, more violently this time. "Colonel," Tara called urgently, "Master Krelig is in central engineering, but he's under attack." The security feeds show at least 6 hostiles converging on his position. Carson moved to her side, studying the security displays. Krelig was indeed in central engineering, working desperately at the gravitational control systems while fending off attackers with one massive arm. The old warrior was formidable, but he was clearly outnumbered and facing increasingly coordinated attacks. "He won't last long enough to complete the stabilization sequence," Carson assessed grimly, "and we're too far away to reach him in time." "Not necessarily, on," Tara said, her eyes lighting up with sudden inspiration. "The maintenance transport system. It's independent of the main power grid designed to function during emergencies. We could reach central engineering in minutes." It was a desperate gamble, but Carson recognized it might be their only option. "Show me." They raced through emergency corridors to a small transport hub, essentially a system of reinforced tubes designed to move maintenance drones and emergency personnel throughout the station during crises. The capsule-like transport was barely large enough for 2. "This leads directly to central engineering," Carson confirmed as they squeezed into the cramped space. "Yes, but," Tara hesitated, "the gravitational fluctuations will make the journey unpredictable." "I've experienced worse turbulence," Carson assured her, though in truth he wasn't certain that was accurate. Launch sequence. The transport shot forward with unexpected acceleration, pressing them back against the minimal padding. Carson could feel the gravitational fluctuations immediately, alternating sensations of weightlessness and crushing pressure as they hurtled through the maintenance system. Tara's face contorted with concentration. "I can sense Master Krelig. His life force is weakening. He's injured but still fighting." The transport shuddered violently as another gravitational wave passed through the station. Warning indicators flashed red across the simple control panel. Structural integrity compromised in Section 12, an automated voice announced. Transport system failure imminent. Please evacuate immediately. We're still 2 sections away from central engineering. Tara reported alarm evident in her voice. Carson made an immediate tactical assessment. Manual override, open the emergency hatch on my mark. But the external corridors are experiencing severe gravitational fluctuations. Exactly what we need, Carson replied, a plan forming rapidly. The fluctuations will give us momentum if we time it correctly. Tara activated the emergency release, and the transport pod's hatch blew outward. Carson grabbed her arm and launched them both into the corridor beyond, just as a gravitational wave hit, propelling them forward at tremendous speed. They hurtled through the emergency corridor, Carson calculating their trajectory and using minimal movements to guide their path. As they approached a sealed bulkhead, he spotted a maintenance ladder leading to an overhead access way. There, he shouted, reaching out to grab the ladder as they flew past. The impact nearly dislocated his shoulder, but he maintained his grip, hauling them both onto the access way as another gravitational wave passed beneath. Central engineering is directly below us, Tara gasped, recovering from the impromptu flight. Carson examined the access panel in the floor. Stand back. With practiced efficiency, he bypassed the security measures and opened the panel, revealing central engineering 15 meters below. The scene was chaos. Krellig engaged in combat with 4 remaining attackers, while simultaneously attempting to stabilize the gravitational systems. Blood from a significant wound darkened his armor plates, but the old warrior fought on with remarkable determination. Carson assessed the situation in an instant. Krellig was positioned at the main control console, his massive body shielding it from direct assault. The attackers were coordinating their movements, 2 engaging him directly, while 2 others circled to vulnerable positions. Standard flanking maneuver, effective but predictable. Stay here, Carson instructed Tara. I'm going down. You'll be killed, she protested. The gravitational fluctuations make the drop unpredictable, and you're unarmed against 4 hostiles with energy weapons. Carson allowed himself a small smile. Being underestimated is an advantage, not a liability. With that, he positioned himself over the opening and waited for the next gravitational wave, timing his drop to coincide with a moment of reduced gravity. He fell like a stone toward the nearest attacker, using the momentum of his descent to maximum effect. The hostile went down hard unconscious before he knew what hit him. The others turned in surprise, their weapons training on this new threat. Krellig roared in approval at Carson's arrival, his massive fist connecting with another attacker and sending them flying across the chamber. The stabilization sequence, he bellowed. I've initiated it, but it requires constant input. I cannot fight and maintain it simultaneously. Carson understood immediately. Hold them off, I'll handle the sequence. As Krellig turned to engage the remaining attackers with renewed vigor, Carson vaulted to the control console. The interface was alien, but the principles were logical enough. A cascading sequence of gravitational adjustments needed to be implemented in precise order to counteract the destabilization. He worked rapidly, hands flying over the controls as he processed the complex mathematical relationships. Behind him, the sounds of combat continued, energy weapons discharging the impact of Krellig's powerful blows, grunts of exertion and pain. A warning klaxon sounded as the station shuddered more violently than before. Critical failure imminent, announced the automated system. Gravitational collapse in 60 seconds. Carson redoubled his efforts, mentally calculating the sequence adjustments needed to compensate for the accelerating destabilization. It was like defusing a bomb in the middle of a firefight, requiring absolute concentration amid chaos. Colonel, Tara's voice came from above. Behind you. Carson spun to see one of the attackers had broken away from Krellig energy weapon aimed directly at him. There was no time to dodge, no cover to seek. The hostile's finger tightened on the trigger. Suddenly, Tara dropped from the access panel above, landing directly in the path of the energy weapon. The blast caught her full in the chest, her slender body absorbing the impact meant for Carson. She crumpled to the floor, her silvery blue skin darkening rapidly. The momentary distraction gave Krellig the opening he needed. With a roar of fury, he seized the attacker and hurled him bodily across the chamber, the impact against the far wall leaving no doubt about the outcome. Finish the sequence, Krellig bellowed, engaging the final hostile with renewed fury. 30 seconds remaining. Carson turned back to the console, his trained mind compartmentalizing the shock and grief at Tara's sacrifice. The final adjustments required perfect timing. Implementing them too quickly or too slowly would accelerate the collapse rather than prevent it. 15 seconds to gravitational collapse, the system announced dispassionately. Krellig dispatched the final attacker and moved to Tara's side, his massive hands gentle as he examined her wound. "She lives," he rumbled. "Barely." 10 seconds. Carson's fingers danced across the controls, implementing the final sequence with precision born of decades of high-pressure operations. Each adjustment had to be perfect. No room for error, no second chances. 5 seconds. The last command entered. Carson hit the activation key. The station shuddered one final time, then stabilized the emergency lights, giving way to normal illumination as systems returned to nominal operation. "Gravitational stabilization achieved," announced the system. "Emergency protocols disengaged, returning to standard operations." Carson moved immediately to where Krellig cradled Tara's injured form. "How bad?" "Severe but survivable with immediate medical attention," the Krillian assessed. "Her species has remarkable regenerative capabilities." As if summoned by the thought, medical personnel began arriving through the now functioning doors, quickly taking charge of Tara and the injured attackers. "She saved my life," Carson said quietly as they watched the medical team work on the young Altarian. Without hesitation. "She saved more than your life, Colonel," Krellig replied, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Her action created the moment needed to prevent catastrophe. Thousands lived because of her choice." Security teams swarmed central engineering, securing the area and detaining the surviving attackers. Commander Reeves pushed through the crowd, her expression shifting from anxiety to relief at the sight of Carson. "Colonel, thank God you're alive." She surveyed the scene with professional assessment. "The situation is under control throughout the station. All diplomatic personnel are safe thanks to your actions." She lowered her voice. "And the Shadow Council operatives are being rounded up as we speak. Master Krellig issued the order personally." Carson looked at Krellig with newfound understanding. The old warrior had been planning this moment, using the attack as an opportunity to expose and eliminate the Shadow Council's influence within the Academy. "Politics," Krellig said with a rumbling chuckle, seeing Carson's expression, "always more complex than they appear." 1 week later, Carson stood before the Alliance Council chamber, his dress uniform immaculate as he awaited their decision. The events at the Academy had accelerated the voting process, bringing representatives from all major Alliance worlds together to determine Earth's fate. The chamber fell silent as the council leader, an ancient being of a species Carson couldn't identify, rose to address the assembly. After careful consideration of recent events and extensive testimony, this council has reached its decision regarding Earth's petition for full membership in the Galactic Alliance. The leader's voice translated perfectly through Carson's earpiece, carried throughout the vast chamber. The courage, resourcefulness, and principles demonstrated by Earth's representative during the Academy crisis have provided compelling evidence of humanity's potential contribution to our collective security and knowledge. Furthermore, the bonds forged through sacrifice, particularly between humans and Altarians, speak to the unifying potential Earth brings to our alliance. Carson's expression remained composed, though internally he felt both pride and apprehension. So much rested on the next words. "It is therefore the decision of this council by majority vote to grant Earth full membership status within the Galactic Alliance, with all rights and responsibilities therein." The leader paused, allowing the murmurs of reaction to pass through the assembly before continuing. "Additionally, in recognition of the unique combat methodology demonstrated by Colonel Carson, the Council authorizes the establishment of an Earth Combat Arts Academy within the Galactic Combat Academy to be led by Earth instructors and open to qualified students from all Alliance species." The chamber erupted in a mixture of responses, approval, shocked curiosity, and in some corners, clear disapproval. Carson maintained his dignified bearing as Ambassador Hawkins approached her normally composed features, unable to hide her elation. "Congratulations, Colonel," she said, extending her hand. "You've accomplished what an entire diplomatic corps couldn't manage in years of negotiation." Carson shook her hand firmly. "I simply demonstrated what humans do best, Ambassador. Adapt, overcome, and build connections, even in the most challenging circumstances. The Earth Combat Academy is an unexpected honor, she noted. The Council rarely creates new divisions within established institutions. An honor I hope to see properly developed, Carson replied, with the right leadership. Hawkins studied him thoughtfully. Are you volunteering for permanent assignment, Colonel? I was under the impression this was a temporary mission for you. Carson's gaze moved across the chamber, noting the diverse species who now looked to Earth with new interest and respect. He thought of Tara recovering in the Academy medical facility, and of Krelig, who had shown that appearances and reality could be very different things in galactic politics. Most of all, he thought of the responsibility that came with opportunity, the chance to shape humanity's place among the stars through understanding, rather than force through wisdom, rather than mere strength. Some temporary assignments become permanent, Ambassador, he said finally. I believe I may have found my final mission. In the days that followed, as Carson began outlining the structure and curriculum for the Earth Combat Academy, he often reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. From a retired colonel teaching veterans in a community center to an interstellar ambassador of human combat philosophy, a transformation as unexpected as it was fulfilling. Master Krelig, now a staunch ally, had assigned the Academy's most promising students to Carson's program. Tara, fully recovered, thanks to Altarian healing techniques, had become his first assistant instructor, her empathic abilities complementing human combat methods in ways Carson was only beginning to explore. Even senior instructor Karax had grudgingly acknowledged the value of Earth techniques, requesting periodic consultation on integrating certain principles into draconian training methodologies. As Carson stood in the newly designated Earth Combat Academy training hall, larger and more prominent than he would have believed possible weeks earlier, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he had known since his Special Forces days. Here in this unlikely setting, he would build humanity's legacy among the stars, not through domination or superior technology, but through the wisdom, adaptability, and philosophical depth that represented the best of Earth's martial traditions. The journey ahead would be challenging, politically complex, and physically demanding, especially for a man his age. But Colonel James Iron Carson had never shied away from difficult missions, and this, perhaps his most important mission of all, had only just begun.